morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. I wanted to let everybody know that today's guest is somebody that I've been talking to for about 3 months, and we've been trying to find good dates for our podcast. So I want to welcome Michael Carnevale. Michael, welcome to Ageless and Timeless.
Well, thank you, Michele. I'm happy to be here. Really looking forward to our podcast today.
Yes, we've had a number of people that we know in common, and Dr. Nina and Mark Rosales, and I met the couple of other people that you're associated with on Saturday when I went to the Living Expo show in San Rafael.
Yes, amazing show.
Yeah, so you were not there, obviously. I would have, at least I didn't see you.
No, I wasn't. I was actually here on the island of Puerto Rico, pulling together a lot of amazing new professionals in the wellness space, the lifestyle space, the medical space, and not to even mention the sports and fitness space. So it's been
Well,
an
here we
amazing.
go. So this is all we want to talk about today. And this is one of the reasons why I've invited Michael on the show, because he's been a lifetime, just about a lifetime advocate of wellness and health and fitness, very much aligned with our podcast mission and also with our distribution on muscle and fitness, as well as all the other podcast sites that focus on, allow us to focus on longevity. So Michael, let's jump in. Why don't you first tell our viewers who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Well, it's a long journey, but I'll make it really short and sweet. Thank you for
Okay.
asking. So I've literally been in the fitness industry, wellness industry, and the lifestyle industry. I like to call it the lifestyle industry because it's a blend of the fitness and wellness conversation.
Mm-hmm.
38 years, going on 39 years. I was actually hired by Jack LaLanne when I was 16 and a half years of age. So the father of fitness sort of set me on my journey and never really looked back. The opportunity of learning the fitness industry from that beginning point back in the very early 80s straight through to today has been obviously 38 plus years. My degree path was physical education. My experiences have owned and operated over 100 fitness centers in my career. So not only did I have the blessing of working with the Jack LaLanne group when I was very young and meeting Jack LaLanne and being trained by him, I actually went off on a journey through college and into sports through a lifetime, and then eventually into physical education. But I found myself in the early stages in the gym industry. So as I got into the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, I met with Dr. Barry Sears in the Zone Diet, which is very world renowned. And we decided that fitness was second to nutrition. It was an equal partnership, but one had to go in front of the other. And we established a fitness franchise called Zone Fit. And that was an amazing journey because we were the first fitness company to actually put nutrition, supplements, and food in front of fitness. So could you imagine walking into a training center or a fitness center and being told that you have to know your nutrition, you have to get on the right supplements, you have to eat the right foods, and then the exercise is free, no charge, and that's the stuff that stirs the drink. Well, we built that, and I had the blessing to go on to many locations. And then when Dr. Sears retired from that part of the business, I actually sold our company, and I got involved in DNA testing back in 06, 07 with the Human Genome Project. So this has been an amazing journey because I got to see your life map, who you are and where you come from, but specifically on the nutrition and lifestyle side, because we wanted to make everything functional. My whole career has been about functional fitness, functional wellness, functional nutrition, because we believe, professionals believe, that if you can't apply it, deny it.
So when you say functional, you're defining that as lifestyle, meaning that you actually apply what you're learning rather than just reading about it in a book, or so you're using it in your everyday life, right? That's what you mean. Correct. By functional. Okay.
Functional, and even in food sourcing, which we're going to talk about today, how can we take nature and nurture? How can we make natural, bringing that person to the next level, keeping it within a domain where the human body wants it, eats it, and processes it, doesn't repel it, doesn't push it out, doesn't cause any side effects or any negatives. Because when I was taught by Jack LaLanne, you have to believe in what you're doing if you're going to be involved in it, or you will leave. So a person mentally and physically will not connect themselves unless they have a belief that this is going to change their life. So that journey that I've been on and going into DNA was really important, because there's no better truth than what you are and who you are and where you come from, because if you know where you're coming from, you'll know where you're going. So that's been sort of that compass that I've been following in my career.
And it's interesting because Kashif Khan, who runs the DNA company, has been a guest on our podcast, and they do actually functional DNA. That's what how they define it. It's a epigenetics, meaning, of course, lifestyle. And so one of the big questions that came up is, can you change your genes? How can you not feel like you're stuck with what your genetics are and that you can't ever be different? So I assume that's what you addressed with the Human Genome Project, as particularly since you were influenced by all the other lifestyle ways to actually change your genes or at least modify them, right?
Well, it's interesting, and there's a couple of points you made there. Yes, I was there early on. So being an educator, lots of people wanted to know what this meant. And your DNA is not your destiny. And if anyone's taken from here today, our DNA is not our destiny if we apply what we know. Now, if we don't apply it, we allow it to play itself out, it could become our destiny. And as you spoke of epigenetics, that actually was the second step for me. I got into epigenetic testing literally in the early stages, which was more about 2010 to 2014, 15. I did tens of thousands of hair analysis tests and various different types of testing to see exactly what was being held onto by the body. How were heavy metals, EMFs, and all this configuration or coagulation of resource that was negative, how was it affecting us? And when you said about gene expression, our genes will express the environment we live in, the lifestyle we choose, and how we take care of ourselves, more so than actually change. But can you damage your DNA from that standpoint? The answer is yes. And could you get better, what we call response from the DNA? And the answer is yes. But the actual DNA itself will never change. That's the cool part. That's your footprint. That's your thumbprint. That's your life print. But what you can do to express it, which we'll talk more about today, is definitely a destiny that you can actually present to yourself and take down this path. And that's been the journey leading up to where we are today. But it's been a long 38 years.
Well, also that's a very great summary and very condensed. So I know there's so much more in between the lines as we talked about
Yes.
a month or so ago, but that's perfect for what we want our viewers to know. And so let me stop you for a moment about Jack LaLanne. What was he like? Does everybody know who he is? If not, tell us who, if you don't think everybody's listening or viewing today knows who Jack LaLanne is, maybe people who are younger than you and me. But why don't you go ahead and just give us a little summary of who Jack LaLanne is so people know.
Well, who he is who he is today. Matter of fact, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who's working on the movie project for Jack LaLanne, the movie, which maybe Mark Wahlberg may be playing Jack LaLanne in the next
Cool.
year and a half, 2 years. So we were actually going down memory lane, and he was actually a consultant asking me a lot of questions about what I remember. So a lot of this is really fresh. But it never really ended with his life passing in 2011. And he was up in Northern California where you are, and he basically had a few thousand people at his funeral. I was one of the guests to see him off to bigger and better places, right? Being in his 90s. Jack LaLanne was an icon before there was an icon. Jack LaLanne was the TV icon, the exercise guru, the person that actually built the juicing industry, the person that introduced some of the best supplements that are still popular today. I remember meeting Mr. and Mrs. Paul Bragg, and through Jack LaLanne as a young man, and I've been taking their products for years and years. So Jack LaLanne had patents on leg extensions, pull down machines, shoulder press machines. I mean, everything that's being used to this day, Jack LaLanne had a footprint, a handprint on it, a body print on it. And really what it came down to is he was able to motivate a generation of people, both you and I, and to motivate us, to motivate the next generation. And he was the first social media conversation because he was on network television for multiple decades. And that was extremely extraordinary at the end of the 50s, right until roughly the end of the 70s. And that really imprinted gyms as we know today. And that is what Jack LaLanne represents, not to mention the juicing conversation. And he really was very powerful in vegetarianism. When Jack LaLanne started his juicing machine, there was only about 2.5 million vegetarians. When Jack LaLanne created his plan through 2010, there was over 27 million vegetarians. So think about it, just his juicing conversation and what he brought to the mainstream just built out what we know today as modern vegetarianism. I mean, even I became a vegetarian, understanding the power of juicing and everything Jack LaLanne taught us. So he had a lot to offer. And he was also partners with Joseph Pilates. He actually
Yeah.
had Pilates centers with Joseph Pilates, and that actually motivated me to open up multiple Pilates centers in the 90s and the 2Ks. So to say he was an imprint on a history of the industry would be an understatement. But don't get me into Lelaine, who's 99, who's
Hmm.
actually going to be at the IDA Fit Show, still working Jack LaLanne's name, still out talking the story, still motivating his family and the next generation. She's another icon that should be celebrated equally as much in many, many ways.
Right. That's his wife.
Elaine Lelaine, that is correct.
European Wellness, founded by the iconic and widely published Professor Dr. Michael Chan, is the world leader in stem cell and peptide therapy, with 26 medical and aesthetic spa locations primarily in Europe and Asia. Their website, www.europeanwellness.com, details the wide range of wellness products that can be ordered using the Ageless code for a 10% discount. They will also offer our viewers discounts on medical and cosmetic services and products if they choose to visit the clinics. I have firsthand experience using their wide range of science-based stem cell and peptide products and am now a loyal customer. Go to their website, www.europeanwellness.com, for more information about this exciting company. Yeah, I remember that. And interesting too that even more compelling, these numbers that you're talking about, because he was before the internet
Correct.
and predated the internet, and so he did all of this with television in the early days, and then of course later on in the early 2000s, the internet was part of his promotion. Correct? I think
infomercials as well. He did many, many, many infomercials. He was part of the dawn of the infomercial age. So yeah, Jack LaLanne took it through many stages, and to this day, his wife is still keeping the dream alive and the story alive, and motivating so many people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. Not to mention people in their 50s and 60s. And you mentioned one thing: does this generation know who he is? Well, the answer is right off the bat, maybe not. But if it really comes down to people like us who continue to tell the story and grow the story and make them realize that there'll be another generation of a Jack LaLanne, but to replicate him may be impossible because of what he did. Now, remember, he was a chiropractor. I mean, he even was a suicidal teenager that was out of shape and unhealthy. And so he was like a humanist in the biggest, most powerful way. It's the best way to describe him.
He's like the Napoleon Hill of fitness. He's
wellness, absolutely.
Wellness. He's inspired.
Think and grow fit, right? That's what we say, Jack LaLanne. Think and grow fit.
Grow fit. That's exactly, instead of think and grow rich, which is the Napoleon Hill. And he's, as you said, and you probably even understated him, because it's just it's so compelling to hear how many people in our generation, at least, have been influenced by his teachings. And even if you don't become a true vegetarian, you still learn about the principles, or a juicer. You've done it. You've probably done it for a while, and maybe you decided it wasn't for you, but you still learn the principles of the nutritional part of it, which I think is really the baseline of what he was teaching. And then, of course,
to your point, was to be able to impact a person in a minute. That is really what people of his caliber are able to do. And that minute could last a lifetime. And millions of people actually have followed a lifetime of his teachings. And it also was born millions of followers who literally created what I like to call the first generation of social recommendations, the social equation, where people referred people. And back in the 80s, when gyms became the most popular conversation, you probably remember all this hoopla around gyms. And having been in the gym industry, if it wasn't for Jack LaLanne, that first social conversation really happened in the gyms, where people talk about their lifestyle, and they started to be prevalent. And I don't know if you know the story about gyms. Do you know the reason why gyms were in basements when they first opened them in the 40s, 50s, and 60s?
Oh, tell us why.
So really interesting story. So I met a lot of his proteges that were much older than me. They were in their 40s when I was in my teens. So they were with Jack LaLanne. And the reason being is they would carry gym bags to hide all their resource inside, because people looked upon people who worked out as not intelligent, anti-societal, malcontents, just there was so many negatives. So they put gyms in basements so that people wouldn't see them front and center. They wouldn't see them at street level. I mean, and if you think about it, and I've seen this firsthand, all these original Jack LaLanne gyms were like in places where they were literally hidden It wasn't until the 80s where they started to build these metropolises of fitness. And there's a
Yeah.
whole story behind that, but it's amazing how this has all happened arguably in even most of the people that are alive today in their lifetimes. This is really a short timeline of the
Mm-hmm.
impact and change. Now the thought of it not being prominent, no matter where we
Mm-hmm.
go, would be like something we wouldn't even think twice about. If it's not prominently displayed, then it's not cool. It's not the way it should be. But that's what.
Exactly. Yeah. And then what was it in the early 90s at Whole Foods, the first supermarket, well, not the first, because there's a story behind that, but one of the, the innovators in the wellness food supermarket. Was that the 90s of Whole
That
Foods?
was late 80s and 90s. I even have an interesting story, if I may. So, owning personal training and fitness centers, I always have spent a lot of time with people invested in themselves. And they went to places like Epicure Market. I was in Miami Beach when I had one of my jams. And I remember getting to know the lead chef at Epicure Market, which became a flagship store for Whole Foods. His name was Steve Fedichesky. And Steve's an amazing friend. And he taught me about how to do whole food nutrition. And then when they opened up these amazing places called Whole Foods, I used to take people in the gyms and I trained my trainers to tour the store. We called it
Mm-hmm.
touring the store, training the people to shop better so their workouts would be better. And I got a funny story if I could share with you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Please.
I would meet people, right? And I think this was when I was in Dallas because I've had the blessings to be all over the United States. And I remember there would be like 8 or 10 or 12 people. It started 2 or 3 and it became a pack. And they would meet me there. And the manager of the store would watch me take people through the store. And people would walk out with baskets of food and they'd check out and he'd come up to me and he said, "We've been watching you." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do something wrong?" He says, "No, it's amazing. We're thinking about hiring someone that could help us at all our stores to
Mm-hmm.
tour people." And I said, "Well, I do this as a passion for my clients." And he said, "No, we want to meet you at corporate." And they actually brought me into corporate. And unfortunately, I couldn't take the gig at the time. But it was an amazing story of education because what they told me, and I'm not speaking for Whole Foods, I'm just speaking for me in the moment, is
Right.
that people didn't know how to actually shop each aisle to benefit themselves. And they would spend too much money. But Jack LaLanne taught me when I was very young in the nutrition side and the fitness side that people have to have balance and they have to have function. So functionally understanding how to shop in the store. Today, people go in with a lot more education, but I would actually say that a lot of people don't understand how to shop the store for better health
Yeah.
and nutrition. So this is the things that Jack LaLanne taught me, and I actually applied this. But I thought that was a really interesting story, how I was actually helping the store grow by educating people and taking them through tours.
Well, to add to that, so in the late 70s, my very close friend Sandy Gooch, who's been a guest on my podcast, and you might remember Mrs. Gooch's Markets, and although I
Yeah,
know you're East
I
Coast,
do
but
remember that.
yeah, she was Los Angeles, but her story was uh, kind of similar in the way to yours, where a personal crisis opened her eyes to getting into the wellness lifestyle wellness world. So she was trying to find all this medication healthy medication, not pharmaceuticals. And she was traveling up and down the West Coast to get. And one of her girlfriends said, "Why don't you start a supermarket to not only have the uh, the medications you need because she had this illness, but to also offer a full range of integrated health." Well, anyway, that was the genesis of the birth of Mrs. Gooch's, which then I think they grew to 7 of them during that period, and then Whole Foods acquired them. So they are now merged as of I think the 80s. That's why I was curious. I thought it was the 90s that they were acquired, but now that you're saying it, I think they were acquired in the 80s. But at any rate, that is the story of a lot of these little. Like I don't know what happened to Epicure. You said Epicure Market also became part of Whole Foods.
Oh, absolutely. And there were so many stores in and around Florida and South Florida at the time that were
Yeah.
being purchased. And I
I
knew a
think that
lot.
Whole Foods strategy was, just it's what Amazon and Apple did too. Acquire your competition to get rid of them and pay them a really good sum of money, but then they continue to control the marketplace with their brand, and these little mom and pops, not so little in the case of Mrs. Gooch's, but the ones that were their competitors disappear. So,
Yeah,
um,
and ultimately Whole Foods was then purchased by Amazon. So now it's an Amazon company.
yeah, who was
So
doing a little bit of a different move. They wanted to get into the lifestyle wellness world, and this was their avenue. So yes, and I love going to Whole Foods because I'm an Amazon Prime member. There's always some really
well,
good
yeah,
deals.
no, it's a good thing if that's how you know how to shop, and once you know what to buy, it's great. But I actually like to share the Jack LaLanne story. Jack LaLanne also went down that route where he built, dozens, well, actually almost 47 locations in the greater New York and New Jersey area where I began, and then
Mhm.
eventually hundreds around the country. And it was merged into Health and Tennis Corporation, so all the health clubs and the tennis centers. And then once that finally came together, which I went through that every step of the way, it became Bally's Health and Tennis Corporation, which ultimately
Right.
bought them all. So every history of this industry, maybe nutrition, fitness, and the like, is just an evolution of growth, which is pretty massive if you think about it. I mean,
Mm.
that was back then. It was multiple billions, even in the '90s, in the '80s and '90s when this happened. So I would say we're sitting on top of a very powerful industry of food and nutrition, and
Oh.
really, I call a pivot point, and we'll talk about that today, where
Mm-hmm.
people are getting smarter and there's more opportunities.
Well, let's take a moment and talk about shopping, just because you're so knowledgeable. And I think a lot of people are confused and they do go down the middle aisles in supermarkets rather than, focus on the side aisles. So why don't we take a minute or a couple of minutes and just
Sure.
quickly tell people how to shop.
Well, there's two ways of shopping, right? There's a fitness shop and a health shop, right? And
Hmm.
I'll unpack the fitness shop because people who start to do fitness want to eat healthy, but they don't align properly with their food choices. So
Yeah.
first of all, if it's in a box, okay, and
Hmm.
it's made in a plant, but it's not a plant,
Yeah.
you really need to step back. Anything
Yeah.
that's packaged and frozen inside of a plastic container will probably not play out really well for you. So you want
Correct.
to go to the peripheral, what we call the circumference of the store, the outer portion, which is where you'll find produce, which you'll find all of your natural, including your vegetarian options. That's where you want to shop first. Literally do the best you can to fill your basket there because you get the fitness and the health all at the same time. And
Hmm.
then the second step, when you think in terms of the fitness, you think in terms of carbs, proteins, and fats, right? If you're exercising regularly and you want to recover better, you have to make sure you have your balance. But again, try to stay on the whole food side. Try to avoid, if you can, package stuff. Because remember, if it's not a plant and it's made in a plant, it's probably not going to process well in your body. So if it's a processed food, it's not going to process. Now, here's one other challenge. Most people assume that if they go into a Whole Foods, and I'm not knocking Whole Foods, this is just a general statement. I think Whole Foods is an amazing company in its own right, but you really have to think in terms of the word whole and the word food. That is
Hmm.
not, and the new vegetarianism today, where they're putting packing, stacking, and glutifying gluten, and they're putting glorifying gluten. That's
Hmm.
not going to end well for most people. Take it from me. I stayed healthy most of my life, well, my whole life, thank the Lord, at 58, and stayed as my skin and everything else as best I can for two
Hmm.
reasons. Number one, I followed that rule, and number two, I didn't let advertising take over because there's a big push for about a decade now we call functional foods. And
Right.
you will find on the health shop, most people will look for foods infused with vitamins, like
Yeah.
vitamin E infusions and K and D and all that. But if it's in a box,
Yeah.
more than likely, it may not work as well. And
Yeah.
that's something for whole food is not. And again, we can package certain foods. That's not a question, but we can't eat most of our foods from packaging. And that's what we have to avoid. So healthily shopping is keeping on the perimeter of the store. And then wisely shopping is trying to avoid marketing. Anything that says it's going to do something because this is what it is will probably not work because the
Right.
body doesn't operate that way. It only works from whole foods.
Yeah, that's very, very, very important and very valuable information, Michael. Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
let's jump to Barry Sears now because there's another commonality. I think you and I spoke about that. I knew Barry as well as you because I was in a joint venture with him. I was in one of the advisors when we were going to do the Zone Cafe. So
Yes.
Barry was trying to, take his brand, which had, I think really evolved because he was so brilliant about one thing that I mean, he's brilliant about a lot of things, but one thing that stood out was inflammation, and he was way before his time. And he saw that inflammation was the root cause of almost all chronic diseases and other matters that relate to, let's say fitness, for example. So where, you injure yourself, and the first thing that happens, it can be partially good, is inflammation, but it's controlling it. And so anyway, Barry was one of the first to start talking, and he used to get a lot of negative reaction from the medical community, and a lot of his anti-aging doctors as well. And so anyway, he kept to it, and he developed all the Zone products and the Zone diet, and that became very well received. And then what he did with you and what he did with us was to create these other, I guess you call them ancillary product and business opportunities that related to the same principle, which is to fight inflammation through the means that those particular businesses. And so you did food, and we had the restaurant side. We were going to develop these Zone cafes, and we had a pilot in Reno that was fabulous and was so well received. Do you remember it at all?
I actually do. I do remember that. Yes, I do.
You and I may have even crossed paths because
Probably have.
Yeah, I mean, it's because honestly, we were ready to launch, and well, it's a long story. I won't get into all the politics because that's not really valuable to people. But it didn't happen, and there was a lot of disappointment. I mean, I was living and working in real estate development. I was developing a huge parcel, 7,000 acres of land on the island of Kauai. And because I had control of all this acreage and could do whatever I wanted, I decided to invite the Zone chefs to a big party that we held outside on my birthday. And so it was in the evening. I remember the flights were coming over from Oahu to Kauai, and they were diverting because they saw all these lights on this property with us having this incredible party. And, to get Hawaiian people to focus on wellness was a big challenge because they were used to eating a lot of stuff that wasn't that healthy. But the Zone guys came over and they did this most amazing meal, and we invited, I think, probably 200 or 300 people, mostly locals. So that was like I thought a life-changing event for a lot of people on Kauai who saw and experienced that there was really some very good food that could be very good for you. And I felt I was doing something not only to celebrate a milestone day, but also just to help people that I really, really liked, and in many cases loved, because they were my collaborators. So at any rate, that was my Barry Sears story. So we have that in common, that we both knew him and both worked with him for a while. What else would you say about that part of your life in terms of what you accomplished?
Well, like anything else, we go through stages in our life where we learn and we grow, and we see things through the eyes of other people, extremely intelligent and very successful in what they do. I learned many, many years ago that every one of us has a lane in life, in business, and in what we do, and other people have their lane. And
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to watch other people show you the way. It's like a GPS,
Yeah.
they're guiding you purposely and systematically. They're showing
Yeah.
you the way. It's my little GPS analogy. But
Yeah.
he taught me a lot about the icosanoids, and really about science of even the fish oil at the time,
Yeah.
before I was a vegetarian. And I just learned so much about what creates inflammation, what decreases inflammation, how that all works. Being from mom and dad, being born in Italy, I'm of Mediterranean descent. So obviously the Zone diet was pretty easy for me, because
Mm-hmm.
arguably I lived in a Zone diet most of my lives. But but I didn't realize some of the mistakes I may have been making. So Dr. Sears really showed that. And where I also learned a lot is he would come. We had some events that we would have at the centers, and he'd come and do like his whole presentation. And I watched every single time. Hundreds of people would be at these events, and how it would galvanize their workouts and would galvanize what they were experiencing. And he was just so awesome at that, because, as you know, he's worked with tons of Olympic athletes. That's how I actually met, because I've worked with over 600 pro athletes in my career. And when you see that, and you give people a direction, and you in a sense, back then he had the Zone bar, which arguably was the forerunner of all the bars today. Back in those days, you didn't have but 3 or 4 bars. Today you have 300 or 400, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Not that, but if you didn't have that, you would never, I've even been blessed to know the original cookie diet doctor was a client of mine in Florida. I could tell you story after story about when you meet the originals, it's hard to
Mhm.
look at everything else, but it's also gives you such insight as
Mhm.
to I've had conversations which take me into testing, and I'm in the testing side of the world today, where I know ratios because of Dr. Sears, and I can look
Yeah.
at science through blood tests now, probably as well. I'm not claiming to be a doctor. I'm not a doctor, but I can
Yeah.
talk to a doctor about it because I understand it, because I have done and been around thousands of testing. It allows us all to sort of teach people. Remember I said at the beginning, functional. The
Yeah.
more you as a coach, a trainer, or a lifestylist, the better you're going to help a person through life, through their journey, because it's the little things that make the big difference over
Yeah.
time.
And
And that,
Michael, I should have said this when I was talking about Barry Sears, that the twin of inflammation is the cure, which he was the first to really tout fish oils, which today, everybody knows that you take fish oils and you make sure you get the good ones without tainting, without mercury in them or other bad ingredients that can get into the fish. So but Barry Sears was the very first, and he was the first to do the testing. I remember he sent my blood up to Canada because that was the only place at the time that was doing a really efficacious test of your omega 3, 6, and 9. And so yeah, I mean he was a forerunner for what we have today, which is thousands of products on fish oils. And of course, people who are in the know do the test to see what their ratios are, like you just said. So,
without
all
that,
right. Well, I don't want to dwell too much. I want to move forward because there's so much to talk about with you. So let's go skip the DNA for a moment because I think everybody understands that the DNA is your blueprint, and you were involved in that in a very serious way at the very beginning at the Human Genome Project. So there's been a lot more development in that world. But I want to skip ahead to what you're doing today because I don't want to run out of time. So let's talk about the business with the testosterone. Let's talk about Epic Tea and what you're doing, and explain to people why this is a product that you can actually take rather than put a cream or inject, which is what most people think you have to do with TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. So let's go over that if you don't mind.
sure, not a problem. I think what we have to look at today is we have to understand that nature nurtures, right? We were just talking about that in every way,
Yeah.
shape, and form. So no different in the testosterone story. And I like to throw a couple of statistics your way because everyone is going to listen. It's really going to find it important. 1 out of every 4 Americans, right? Well, men, we'll start with men, under the age of 50 today, in 2024, are experiencing low testosterone.
Yeah.
Now, it's even more stark when it comes to women. They're thinking the numbers may be one in three. And
Yeah.
they're evolving these numbers as we speak because it's a male and female conversation. It's not just a male. Unfortunately, many years ago, the American Medical Association hijacked the testosterone conversation just for men. It's not just for men, it's for women
Right.
as
Right.
well. When I speak in terms of both. I have complete connectivity, objectivity, and most importantly, equality in this conversation. But they've done
Right.
the research that 30% of overweight people have a testosterone deficiency. That's just being overweight, 10 to 20 pounds. Okay. Now, if you go to people that are above 80 years of age, it's 50+% of people. Okay. And we have a massive amount of people today over the age of 80, like we've never had in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And then low T levels are really harmful. Physically, we know that. But what about the mental and the social concerns that are coming from it? And that's just a very important statistic. And almost 40% of all men above 40 have testosterone levels under 300 milligrams or deciliters, which
Mm-hmm.
basically means that they're operating 10 to 20 years younger than their age. They're
Mm-hmm.
operating like teenagers in that much testosterone. And that's not healthy because remember, we're not worried about the minute, we're worried about the lifetime. When you hit
Correct.
30, you go down about 1% a year. If you're already low and you don't address it and you're going down 1% a year, it's staggeringly scary because there's mental health issues, in reference to cortisol levels and all the other things. And what are we seeing today, Michelle? It's playing
Mm-hmm.
out in front of us. So
Mm-hmm.
what if something as simple as, and could I throw one other statistic, which is probably one of the most important ones? Like I'm going to be at the A4M show, one of the biggest, top 2 medical shows in the world. And their whole show is about metabolic syndrome, the whole show. And
Yep.
yet metabolic syndrome has a connection, obviously, to diabetes. But as
Right,
far as all diabetic patients go,
right,
25% of all men with diabetes have low testosterone.
right.
25%. And another
Yeah.
study came out and showed that that number may be double or not triple worldwide. And it's actually running at the same category with women. So that in and of itself tells us that we're really sitting at a very, very crucial time in human health.
And so, what is the cause? Why have testosterone levels dropped so dramatically in men and women?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of issues related to, and I'm going to spell out about 4 points, right? Number one, there is a genetic component, right? It's not the only component, but there is one. We're actually seeing it. But mainly it's lifestyle. Let's be clear. We have a generation of people that have spent 20, 30 years, maybe even 40 years eating processed foods and eating foods that are void and having access to foods that no generation in the history of the world has ever had. And we're not talking about the good stuff, right? We're talking about cheap food, right? I mean, not to knock any one store, but today you can go buy food in stores like dollar stores and, and distribution stores and all these different stores where you're buying a lot and you're overeating because it's all about how much food you can get for your money. So that's affecting people. The amount of sugar that's being put in the human body, the average person does 3 times more sugar than their body can process in a day, each and every day. So now that's hitting. We also now know that the EMF conversation is a
Mm-hmm,
lot more intense, and
mm-hmm.
we're bathing ourselves in technology. I mean, even right now, we have a computer in front of us, we have Wi-Fi. If we're not doing something to combat that, that is affecting us, right? So you put this together into one giant configuration or coagulation, and you
Mm-hmm.
literally are attacking the body. And it just so happens that testosterone levels take a big hit. And that is what we're seeing. And they're trying to pinpoint, but again, everybody's capable of processing things different than the next, but
Yeah.
we're all being affected by all those points. And stress, the biggest
Yeah.
one is stress. We
I
have
was just
never
going
had
to say
all
that
these stresses.
that I knew you were coming. I'm going to hopefully say it, but I think stress is one of the biggest reasons that people are experiencing low testosterone. It's stress can be very subtle because you don't even sometimes realize that you're under stress, but your body is reacting because stress is just invasive, and it's omnipresent in our world today.
Yeah, it is. And we can't stop aging, right? And
Mhm.
we can only slow it down biologically, but we can't obviously stop it chronologically, right? And the adverse effects of everything we just talked about. But really, why is it trending? This is the biggest question. Why is currently the conversation online trending? Top four. We're talking about testosterone conversations is in the top three to top four
Yep.
conversations
Yep.
online right now, and people are searching for an answer. I mean, it's a lot bigger than we think. And if your body can actually produce something and you're not giving its resources to produce, and I'm going to talk about that today because providing somebody a resource where they can naturally produce it from their own resource within their
Mm-hmm.
own body is the
Mm-hmm.
healthiest natural way, because we both know this. There's a massive thing going on with injectable drugs today, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole other conversation, a whole other day, that
Mm-hmm.
is literally sweeping the world, not just the United States, the world.
Mm-hmm.
And young people today are fast tracking, but they're going to end up paralyzing their intestinal tracts. They're going to end up causing so many things that are going to have negative effects, but everyone wants it now. Well, in the
Right.
testosterone world, it's no different. Chemical
Right.
injections and pills and seeds that are placed in your, and when I say seeds, when they're placing pellets into your body
Yeah.
and all these things, it's all for a minute, maybe an
Yeah.
hour, maybe a day, but it's
Well,
not a
not
life.
only that, but your body gets lazy if you keep feeding it exogenously, right? You're feeding like it was DHEA and the adrenals, or just anyone, because these are all produced by organs in the body, and the
Correct.
organs say, "Hey, I don't need to make this anymore because I'm getting it externally." So I think
Yeah.
that part of it with hormones is always very tricky, is to balance so that your body doesn't stop making the naturally. And so, of course, testosterone is one of the big ones. You know Jay Campbell. We
Yes.
talked about Jay, and Jay's been on. He and I are doing the series, so I've been on his, coming on his the second time, and he's been on mine twice now. And he's kind of the father, non-medical, not a doctor, but for his whole life he's been studying this. And 15 years ago he wrote the Bible on testosterone, like 600 32-page book that still today, he obviously there have been updates because things have changed dramatically in all medical context from 15 years ago. And so, but anyway, the Jay Campbell, he's the king of knowledge on testosterone. I think you probably would agree with that. It's just that he does not subscribe to pills. He thinks the only way to get testosterone increase is through injection and now peptides, which can be injected or taken orally. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I learned that there are many ways. What do they say? There's many roads that lead you to Rome, and there's many directions. And in science, we know today that there's the natural study, and then there's the synthetic conversation. We're trying to take intelligence and knowledge to a whole nother level. We have AI today, which is going to help us out in a big way. But I'm a naturalist. Most people would prefer natural because when you use the word natural, on the most part, you have less side effects. In a lot of instances, no side effects. But what if there's a product, a science that naturally, with a high standard of natural proven ingredients that's clinically proven, right, significantly increasing total biologically active testosterone. Let me explain this because you have biologically active testosterone. I have it. Every single human being has it. The question is it being activated, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to just boost it where we lift what's there up so fast that it will inevitably crash, or we don't want to do it chemically where it stops being produced, right? Because that's just the way it works, right? It gets lazy. I love that you said that. But what if we can just increase your testosterone naturally and then maintain an orbit? I want to give you an analogy, and I want everyone to listen to this. If you buy herbal compounds that increase testosterone or use synthetics, it's a rocket ship. Right? Think of a rocket taking off at Cape Canaveral, right? It's impressive, right? And it goes up fast. But what goes up must do what if it doesn't get to orbit? Come down. But if you get it to orbit, right, naturally, progressively get it to orbit, it'll orbit. Because think of a ship once it gets into orbit, it stays in orbit. It circles in a circular way. Well, that's really what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes actually does. It works with what you have. It helps to increase your body's capacity to produce and help maintain with no side effects. And you can never get it off. That's important. So that's
Michael?
Yes, could you hear me?
Okay, yes. We lost you for a minute. The screen froze, Michael, but now you're back. So good.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard? So
you were just saying about how the body gets lazy and that you're trying to balance with the non-synthetic.
Right. And what if you looked at all these products and they're like rocket ships? Did you hear that part?
We did. Yeah.
Okay. What we're saying is we can create an orbit where naturally your body will maintain a stable orbit, will naturally help maintain levels, increase them, and then maintain them without a side effect, and giving the body what it naturally needs to continue to produce what it naturally has. Because there's an old expression, work with what you have. But typically what we've seen over the last decade or 3/4 of a decade is that we don't go there first. We don't, in a lot of instances at all. We trust that if we go chemically, we go fast. If we go herbally, we go fast. And then there's a crash, but that's okay because we have to keep on doing it. But eventually the adrenals get affected. Eventually the heart and the lungs and the kidneys all get affected by too many, what we call juxtapositions, like too fast, too furious, too much. And then you have to go in there and you have to maintain it. But what if you can simply test your blood and see the same results without that concern? And what if you can do it long-term without any side effect? And what if you can maintain great healthy levels because it's all natural? These are the questions that you ask people, and 1 of every 2 or 1 of every 1.5 will say, no, that's really what I like, and that's what I would want. And that's
but they also say, Michael, at the same time, they'll say, but I want fast results. I want to lose 5 pounds in 5 days. That's kind of the mantra of the whole modern generation. We all want results immediately. So, but I just want to clarify one thing for everybody. The difference in testosterone, you have what's called total testosterone, which is how much testosterone is circulating in your body. But as Michael said, you also have free testosterone, which is how your body can absorb that testosterone, I'm being very simplistic, but not non-medical about saying this, how I explain this, but you get what I think everybody will get what I'm saying, that when Michael was referring to, everybody has testosterone, but how much can your body actually use and gets into your cells, correct? Is that
Right. I mean, if I could even define it, most of your testosterone is attached to proteins, right? So the proteins,
yeah, that's yes.
yeah, you said that. I'm just going to reiterate if I
Yeah,
could.
no, that's good. I'm
Protein,
glad you said it.
oh, not
Yeah,
a problem. The proteins prevent your tissue from using the testosterone immediately, which helps control the amount of active testosterone in your body. But
right.
testosterone is not attached to proteins. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, when it is attached to proteins, it's called free testosterone. Free
right.
testosterone acts on your tissues. But this product is going to work more so where it's sort of like a product that naturally, like little Velcro balls attached to your protein to help activate what's there, right? Just keep it simple. And
Okay.
create a seesaw effect, which creates more of a balance between your estrogen and your testosterone so that you don't go up too fast on one side and down on the other or vice versa. Nature has a way of regulating this, and we've been able to develop this in a seed. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But yeah, this is
Yeah,
where we're with this.
right. Okay, so um, in the Epic Tea, that's the name of the product that everyone needs to know about. And I was going to bring a bottle. I just happened to, unfortunately, I threw it out because I was traveling. So I put the Epic Tea into a baggie. So I don't have it in front of me, but I'll have the, when we do the editing of this tape today, I'll have them put the Epic Tea up so people can see the product. But in the Epic Tea is rhodiola. And everybody needs to know that rhodiola is probably one of the best herbs for cortisol, managing your cortisol levels, and it's all natural, and it can do it, in a process. It's not overnight, but it will help to reduce your cortisol. And if you have too high cortisol, that means you're under a lot of stress, and that also means you're probably gaining a lot of weight, and it also means you probably have low testosterone. So for all these reasons, rhodiola is a very important ingredient. And so maybe talk about that for a second, Michael, with also the other ingredients that are helping this Epic Tea to be completely effective, and in terms of naturally, like you're saying, increasing your testosterone.
Well, I think it's what we're talking about is what we like to call a proprietary blend of ingredients and resources. One is we use our proprietary Testasurge, which is our all natural fenugreek. And when I say all natural, think of a 30-year-old biotech company out of India, right? That is a powerful company that is literally taken fenugreek to a whole nother level, debittered it, defatted it, studied it, 30 years. 20 different studies, 200 some odd patents, 12 certifications. I mean, it does not get cleaner and more powerful than this. And
Right.
and then they created a proprietary blend being Epic Tea, which they added rhodiola, which creates that balance, that synergy, that little additional benefit in the cortisol. Then they added the B vitamins and obviously some zinc and some boron to really balance it out. So what we've created is a very powerful physician formulated, as you mentioned at the beginning, and it's really bioactive fennoseed, right, extract. So there's a glycoside in the fennoseed, which allows us to take that out. We optimize, and I want to be important, we don't boost, we don't blast off, we don't replace. This is not a replacement. It optimizes testosterone with this balanced formula. Also, there's a nootropic connection to the brain, and we create that synergy between the testosterone and the brain conversation, which basically works with reducing, I always say it's like an anti-aging product, right? And a stress reducer. And so many amazing conversations, but we're trying to enhance natural testosterone optimization to keep you over what we call a health span or a lifespan. Because if you look at it fast, you'll get fast. But if you look at it properly, you'll get exactly what you need. And that is, by the way, in some instances, depending on the human being, because there's a DNA response, some people see results. I mean, this goes to work in less than 12 hours. Once it goes to your processes, I did say it's a seed. And I want everyone to realize something. This seed, which has other facets to it, is basically the most powerful seed in the world. People, for some reason, don't realize it's the highest protein seed in the world. That's where the protein decision comes in, attaching to the testosterone. Is the lowest carb, and it has the greatest glycemic conversation you can imagine, and the lowest fat. So you're
Right.
dealing with a low fat, low carb, high protein seed that
Right.
really has all these values, and it's all natural. It's vegan. It's gluten free, GMO
Right.
free, soy free, and no glyphosates.
Right.
And I don't know if we can make it any better, but we will work on it to even make it better.
Well, that's the other, and they just flashed me that we're running out of time, so I want to be sure we cover that. So basically, the two products that I've been using that Michael and Mark Rosales, his partner, have provided me to experiment with uh, are the Epic Tea and this fennel seeds, which is the fenugreek seed that they process, like Michael just described, and you can buy both of them. Unfortunately, the fennel seeds, you guys you have people over subscribe to it, so you don't have. It's hard to keep it in stock, right? So he said there's going to get me some more because I ran out. I think I told you this. I ran out about a month ago,
Well,
and
you
Mike gave me
really
a little.
both.
He gave me a little at the show, and I mean, I use it every day now. Until I ran out of it, I was using it every day. So I highly recommend people look into the fender seeds. And so both these products are, because we're running out of time, I want to be sure people know about them. So both these products are they on your website, or how can people buy these products?
Well, right now, just so you know, it's going through professionals only for the minute. Soon enough, and we'll be able to get with you so you'll be able to get it out to everybody who watches the
Okay.
show. Back to
Okay.
the final cut of our show.
Yeah.
This is a seed that you can put on anything, any food, any resource. I put it in pasta sauce. I put it over a plant-based ice cream. I mean, it put it on cake.
Yeah.
What it does, it works with the gut. It actually works on blood sugar management. It's a fibrous resource with 8 or 12 ounces of water. It's amazing what it does. With the
Yeah.
testosterone conversation, it helps with weight management. We're doing studies on it now. They will both be available very shortly. One being in a capsule, the other one being in a flake, where you just take one scoop a day, and it's
Yeah.
equivalent to taking almost like a capsule. And this is
Yeah.
what we call the functional resource. So we'll tune in. We're going to have this. Obviously, our product is Epic-Tea, and then this will be Fennel Seeds, and it'll be
Okay.
available to everyone very shortly. So excited about making sure it's on the site.
Okay, so FENUSEEDS, fennel seeds,
Fennel
and then
Seeds.
Epic,
Yep.
and then just no S on the end, fennel seed, and then
Fennel
Epic,
Seed
yeah, and
dash
then
T.
Epic dash T. Okay, all right, and then what's the name of your website that people can look at when it becomes available for the consumer?
Well, the website itself will be epic-t.com, and then the Fennel Seeds will have their own website. Fennel Seed will have
Oh,
its own
o-
website. But what I'll do is I'll
okay,
make sure that you have a site where they can get information before this comes
okay,
in. And you were the first, and I was
okay,
the first. And we'll make sure you'll have that. So everyone who comes to the show will actually see it. And we'll make sure you have that.
okay. Yeah, because we have a Michelle Recommends on our website. So even though we might not make it in time for the editing of this the podcast to have it at the end of the show, we always ask the guests, do they want to promote their product or service? Because we want people to know how they can take the next step of action. So if we don't get it there, we'll get it on Michelle Recommends. So that stays on the website forever. And so if you'll get us that information, Michael, we will make sure that people know how to get these products. And do you want to talk about the price point on them, or is that still too
Sure.
early?
Well, I'll just be very simple on the current price point. It is the most cost-effective price in its category in the history of this category. That's how powerful it is. $69.95 for a 2-month supply. If a person obviously just is working on maintenance, right?
Yeah,
That's a capsule a day. A person
yeah,
has some needs, T is low. They may use that in a 30-day window. Either way, very inexpensive. But the ultimate
yeah,
objective is to get people on maintenance. So if you take the $69.95 and you put that into your budget, that will last 2 months. So believe it or not, that's like $35 a month. You'll
yeah,
double up on it if you have a need, and then eventually when you get where you need to be. We're also going to be opening people up through other professionals to a very unique test where you'll actually be able to do be able to do something really simple, get your testosterone in a minute. We have a 15-minute, what we call rapid testosterone test that we'll be
yeah.
able to show you on your site where they can go to different practitioners. And this
Good.
is something that will be available. So we're making this conversation simple, easy.
Yeah,
I like to call it democratized. So you have not only just an option, but you have a scientific breakthrough. And then the price on the seed product has not been determined, but it's going to be extraordinarily cost effective, equal to this, and it'll be a
hmm
functional food. I want everyone to think about it as buying flax seeds or buying pumpkin seeds or
Yeah.
buying any seeds,
Yeah.
but this is more of a functional food at the very, very high level, and it'll be
Yeah.
very cost effective, and that'll be available soon.
And just so everybody knows, it tastes really good, because if you were eating them without all the work that goes into making them what they are when you get them, one Mark said it would break your teeth. Two, that's very bitter. I mean, fenugreek, at its raw material, as a seed. So anyway, don't do it that way. Just wait for
No,
wait for fennel seeds, because they really taste good, and they're all made for you, so that you don't have to lift a finger. Just buy the seeds and put them on as Michael said, and almost anything. They are
anything.
very kind of neutral, but
Yeah.
they're packing powerful nutrients. So Michael, I wish we had more time, but we will have to say goodbye for today. And we'll wait for you to update us, and that way we can make sure that these two products get the awareness, as well as the little tests that you just mentioned. So that's just a prick of the finger. So that's an easy one for everybody. If just you want to know what your cortisol level and your testosterone, your total testosterone, doesn't do free testosterone. Not
Yeah,
yet.
not
Yeah.
yet.
Okay. Well, very good, Michael. So let's say a wonderful goodbye to you today, and enjoy Puerto Rico. I know you split your time between Florida and Puerto Rico, and lucky you that you're in Puerto Rico today. So enjoy your time, and we'll be following up with you. And thank you so much for taking time today to be with us.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and it's wonderful being here, and thank you for allowing me to be a guest, and thank everyone for taking the time to listen. Have a great day,
Okay.
everyone.
All right. You too. Bye bye.